thank you for the group that has joined us here tonight to our Shaping Sport in Central Alberta discussion and in information sharing. I'm going to, my name is Scott Robinson. I'm the contract CEO for the Central Sport Group. And on the call here tonight, we've got several of our Central Sport board members. Al Furchuk, our chair, is on the call. Doug Spicer, one of our directors. Lori Schiller, one of our directors. New directors. Todd Thiessen, one of our new directors. Russ Ladd is our vice chair. I see Trevor Thomas as well is on tonight, one of our directors. And I think that's it. And then in addition to myself, Christina Verticchio, who is our contract communications marketing person. For anybody who's been trying to work with our website, you've probably touched base with Christina more than once here in the last little while. So, and welcome to all of those of you that are representing sports or sport groups on the call tonight. Hopefully we can have a good discussion, some information sharing, help you to get to know a little bit about who we are, but also we want to learn a little bit from you about some of the things that are affecting you, and we'll talk a little bit about what's going on in the community as well. So with that, I'm going to just flip. I'm not sure what that was. So welcome to everybody. So tonight we're going to kind of talk about five things. We're going to talk a little bit about Central Sport, who we are and what we are. For some of you, you may have heard a little bit about us. For some of you, you may not have, and so this will be new. And so we'll try to give you a little bit of an outline of what we are and who we are and why we're here. We're going to talk a little bit about hosting sport events in Red Deer. The city of Red Deer is undertaking a new major direction relative to sport events, and we want to hear from you about that. And we'll talk a little bit about how that fits in with this group as well. We want to listen a little bit about what your needs are as a sport, what kind of things that are affecting your sport, and maybe learn a little bit more about your opportunities and challenges. Christina is going to talk a little bit about how you can connect with us, which is really important, and talk about our website and how it was designed and how it really is designed for the sport community in mind. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about sport volunteers and what we're planning from a Central Sport point of view. Laura Naldred, who is our board member responsible for our volunteer committee, is not here tonight, unfortunately. She's got a birthday, her own, so we let her off the hook tonight, and so she didn't have to be here. But I'll cover some of the things that she wanted to share tonight as well. So that's our agenda. We kind of got 2 hours planned. We don't think it'll take that long tonight, but we'll see where it goes. Certainly won't be any longer than that, but likely a little bit less than that. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Al Furchuk, our chair, to talk a little bit about who Central Sport is and what we're about and where we're going. Al?
Thank you, Scott, and welcome to everyone, and especially those of you that probably got home from work and had another commitment with us tonight in your limited spare time. We are really wanting to hear from you as a sport leader in your sport, but also we find that most individuals involved in sport have opinions about many things related to sport. And the purpose of this evening and going forward is we always want to have a good two-way communication. Central Sport, just to go back just a wee step, is a legacy of the Canada Winter Games and has basically been planned, officially sanctioned from the Games as a legacy since 2018. As we all experience, COVID has slowed down many developments, and I would really extend a thank you to our initial board of 8. For 2 years, we planned and planned and planned and spun our wheels. And we did hear from sport groups online, and we are now really looking forward to hitting the ground running and working with local sports groups. Our board is made up of individuals primarily who've been through 20 to 30 years or more sport experience. And something that jumps to mind, for example, when I first volunteered for a president's role, first thing I did is I got went to the library and pulled out a book of Robert's Rules of Order. I didn't really have a clue what I'd volunteered for. And gang, if you find with your sport group, if you're caught in similar situations, that anxiety, there's no need for it. And I'm looking at our board and some of our recent members, and I see some of them are smiling because we've all been there. And we're here to help sport groups probably navigate and make a few hundred less mistakes than we made, if I could put it that way. Because and that's what's so pleasing to me, is to lead this group as a chair with the experience in our community. Final point I would make in terms of what we can do and what I think personally we should do for sport is we need to blow our horn. We need to advocate that there's not, it's not minor baseball, it's not lacrosse, or it's not minor football speaking alone to decision makers and politicians. We have one voice for sport, and we will listen to you to make sure that we're representing you and our sport community when we advocate, whether it's for access to facilities, whether it's, looking at the health of our community. And we all know when we go online or we have friends that visit us in Red Deer, people really don't have a clue how wonderful a community this is. Sometimes the bad press dominates. So we need to advocate for what we can bring together to our sport community. So with respect to that, I would look at the slide presentation, Scott, on our board structure. If you wouldn't mind pulling that one up on the screen. Just okay. We will be talking about the pillars when we talk about the committees. When I talk with you about the board structure, this evolves over time. And what is different about this board is with the COVID restrictions, etc., and our own sustainability plan to be around here for a long time, every board member has agreed to become part of what we call a management or work board. And you see in the structure, we have a board of directors, but I wanted to point out at the bottom, we have currently 4 working committees, and we will have further subcommittees, and the board members serve on those committees. We also will be making a call out, and if you know of any that you would like to join us on our subcommittees, that's really important in terms of our commitment to connecting. As I pass off now to the next stage, early in our slide presentation, we don't need to go back, Scott, but a key set of values for Central Sport, number one is we want to collaborate with stakeholders such as businesses. And key collaborators are all local sport groups. And when you talk to Central Sport Board or a member about collaboration, we will always encourage honest, open communication. There's no political agendas here. We want to be an advocate for sport with a true message. So this evening is part of, we listened to sport groups. The first open session we had, if you can believe it, I can, I'm that old already, was October 2017. We had an open forum with 26, 28 sport groups. Tonight's going to put us in 2022 relevancy. That's our hope for this evening. So we're a collaborating group. And finally, not finally, but a second value right at the top is whatever we do when we work with your sport groups or we host an event, and it could be a local regional, it could be a high school championship. It could be something like the Winter Games in the long term, but we want to always put that stamp of excellence. Excellence in how we work as collaborators and then how we put sport forward in our community. Again, thank you for attending, and I'll hand it over now to our moderator, Scotty.
All right, Al. Yeah, I guess the groups that we have structured, just maybe just a little bit on the kind of the focus that we have through our committees is that first of all, that we haven't, we're planning to have, we've kind of had it off on an ad hoc basis, but as part of the organization, we want to have a stakeholder advisory council that has kind of the big stakeholders at the table. We're kind of already doing some work with this group around major events, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the idea of this is to make sure that we're hearing from those major stakeholders, that the board is hearing from them and what's important and what are the challenges and opportunities, so that we can share that back to the sport community and we can kind of have that two-way dialogue along the way. And so that's part of our structure. We have a series of committees. We have a volunteer committee that is focused on developing the side of the sport that's so critical at a local level, and that's the volunteer side. And we'll talk more about what that means in terms of the services that we're looking at providing and supporting you as a sport group with going forward. We're going to have an events committee to look at how we can support you in your event development, whether it be you hosting an event or whether it be an event in the community that is coming from the outside, and some of the things that need to happen in order to make sure that we're not just hosting events, but we're hosting them at the highest levels possible. We have a sport development committee and advocacy celebration committee that is kind of looking at the grassroots level of sport and how we can enable and solve problems and connect some best practices between sports and deal with issues that we may be facing in sport, and as well as making sure that we're advocating for sport, as Al mentioned, and creating a great platform for celebration of sport and sport leaders and sport achievement. And then finally, we'll have a committee related to our own sustainability, revenue and sustainability, in which we can look forward to pull together a strong business plan for the organization, but also share those resources out to the sport community as well. So that's just a bit about our committee structure in terms of how we're structured right now. Sorry, I didn't realize my camera was off. Sorry about that. Anyway, so that's kind of how we're structured right now, as Al mentioned, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we're up to so far as we go along here. The first thing that we wanted to talk and get a little bit of dialogue from you tonight is around hosting events in Red Deer. For those of you that may know, and many of you may know, so I won't spend too much time on it, but about a year ago, Red Deer embarked with a consulting firm to look into, about a year and a half ago, actually, developing a major event strategy. What the initial consultant report was about, trying to understand how Red Deer should position itself from a hosting point of view of both major sport events and cultural events. The result of that consulting work produced a report that identified that the city of Red Deer should consider creating what they call a major event strategy, and ultimately a destination development corporation to manage that strategy on behalf of the city. And how that's different from where we are today is that if any major event is looking at Red Deer as a potential host site, and that could be anything from examples such as the World Junior Championships that were held here, or a major curling event or figure skating event, or almost any event of sort of national or international scale, often they would deal directly. First of all, they would be choosing Red Deer from sort of an outside-in perspective. Instead of Red Deer going out and looking and going after some of these events, often we're just passively waiting for them to come to us. And because of Red Deer's great location and facilities, we often do get a lot of those events considering Red Deer. But there's many, many events that we could host that require more of a proactive strategy to go after. And so the major event strategy really spoke to taking on this in a more coordinated and organized fashion, and separating some of the decision making from the city to an arm's length corporation that would look at this. Since that time, that report clearly identified a couple of things. First of all, the reason why Red Deer should look at this is because of the size of some of the events and the opportunities that come. The economic and social benefits of hosting major events, whether they be cultural events or sport events, is a significant benefit to the city. And but if you're going to do this in a way that is a consistent sort of theme and sort of brand and strategy, you have to do it in a coordinated way. But interestingly, so from that report, what's happened since then, is that they've decided to move the focus of the Destination Development Corporation to fit underneath Tourism Red Deer versus it being a standalone organization that would be perhaps something where Red Deer Tourism might have fit within. So they're working on a business plan to support the major bid strategy as they've outlined in the first report. And some of you may have been a part of a couple of sessions that were held to that end here about a month and a half ago, or almost 2 months ago now, where they were looking for feedback from the community on what was important. One of the things that we wanted to bring to the sport community is make sure that everybody was aware that this was happening, number one. And number two, we really wanted to understand from the sport community, what they felt about that from a local sport point of view, what was important to them. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. And then the second thing was we're going to talk about is, what is it that when you look at hosting events at maybe more a provincial or regional level or local level, what is important to you in your sport, and what are some of the opportunities you see and some of the challenges you face? So that's kind of the first topic, and we've kind of framed it in two questions. The first question, thinking about those major events that end up coming to Red Deer or that we could go after as a city, what are some of the important benefits to hosting those events, and what are some of the things that we should be considering as a city from the sport community's point of view? And I will say that when we were talking, when the consultants were working with tourism and they're asking these questions, they're really looking at it from an economic benefit point of view or a tourism point of view. And we felt that it was really important for the sport community to look to have a voice and make sure that they're considering it from the actual sport community's point of view as well. And that's why we're asking this question. So with that, we're interested in to hear from you what you think about Red Deer's having a major event strategy and going after more big events. What do you think the benefits are? And maybe anything you think that is important from your sport organization's point of view that they should be considering if they're going to do that. So I'm opening the floor. Don't be shy. You can either raise your hand with the little hand at the bottom of the screen there, or you can just speak up. Anybody who has a comment or a thought or an idea, don't be afraid to start us off. Have I missed any? Go ahead.
Scott, maybe I'll share a couple of additional prompts. So like what we're looking for is like, when we have those major events, what is the benefit to the sports sector? Often, there's a lot of economic research that happens after events, and we can see the impact to the hospitality industry. We can see those like dollar outcomes, but in terms of you with your sport, what would be a desirable outcome if we're hosting a major event? Is it just that economic development, or is it venue upgrades, profile, sport legacy, inclusion, volunteer development? Oh, Christine's got
her hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Christine.
Hi, I'm from the Artistic or Synchro Swimming Club here in Red Deer. So one of our problems in Red Deer, and I don't know if there's much anyone here can help us, is we don't have a proper sized pool to host those events. Like you're probably aware with the Canada Winter Games, those artistic swimming events were held down in Calgary.
Right.
So I know that's always on the city's thing and talks of a bigger pool, but that's kind of what we need on that end for us.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. Good point. I mean, and I think the question becomes one of, one of the things about the Canada Games that was really unique, and it is unique, is that we were able to leverage the games opportunity into some infrastructure updating and in some cases building. Perhaps as part of this major event strategy, we should be going after a major aquatic event that would induce the city to build that facility along those lines. And that was similar to how the games happened, even though we were bidding on the games, we were probably got the games because the city stepped up and said, we're going to invest in some major infrastructure along with the games. So that's an example of how it could happen. Any other comments? Thoughts? What's the benefits of hosting major events in Red Deer? Is there any downside to hosting major events in Red Deer? It's not all rosy when you host major events. I can't see if anybody's putting their hand up, Christine, unless it shows up. Anybody else have a comment?
Yes, sorry, Kimberly Smith has her hand up.
Okay.
And then Mike Wilkinson.
Okay, Mike, go. Kimberly, if you were first, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Smythe. I'm with the Central Alberta Lacrosse League, and as well as with Alberta Lacrosse Association. And I think one of the biggest concerns that we have for our league within Central Alberta Lacrosse is the vast difference in the price of floor that we have between our Red Deer clubs and then our outlier clubs. We represent Central Alberta Lacrosse, so we are Lacoka, which is Pinoka and Lacombe, Blackfalds, Sylvan Lake, Stettler, Three Hills, Innisfail, Olds, Carstairs, and the biggest issue that we have is that we always try to have our eye opener, which is this weekend actually coming up at the Collicut, and it's generally the floor is around $200 an hour, whereas in our smaller centers, which still have ice in them or trade shows going on this weekend or what have you, we get it for considerably less. So hosting within the city of Red Deer is hard for us when we want to do a large event because of the price of the floor. And in minor sport, that's probably our biggest area of contention because we have limited funds.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, who is the other one? I can't see the hands up. Oh, there you are, Mike. There, I see it. Go ahead, Mike.
Mike, if you're talking, you're still on mute.
No, sorry, I'm just here with my daughter, so she just needed an extra hand for a second here.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm Mike. I'm with the Central Alberta Buccaneers, and I won't say that we represent all of football in Central Alberta, but our club has many players and executives and volunteers that also help coach around Central Alberta, so we're very committed to different things. One of the things that's really been a big benefit to us, having played in the league final 4 out of the last 6 years, is just the atmosphere that's come with growing. We're getting in touch with lots of prospective players, and just the upgrade at Great Chief Park has been very beneficial to have that nice venue to have our events with. So definitely a lot of positives with having the development of that region that kind of came out of the winter games there.
Right. Obviously, you've got someone else that's got a future budding, perhaps football star, or perhaps another athlete that has a few comments too. That's awesome, Mike.
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. No, I think it. Obviously, the hosting major events can be, really can be beneficial from an infrastructure point of view. The reality is there's not many like the Canada Games, like that type, but. That being said, one of the things we need to do as a sport community is identify what are our gaps and look for opportunities where perhaps hosting events can fill in those gaps through ensuring that, we leverage the community and the city to support those bids when the time's right. So, Carolyn, you got a comment?
Yeah, hi, I'm Carolyn Norman with Red Deer Ringette. So obviously the Canada Winter Games was really good for us. Like we had a lot of exposure with the high level ringettes coming to town and stuff. So which was good. We had an influx, and obviously then COVID was pretty detrimental because it made it very hard for kids that were up playing other sports to continue to play. But I do know, just back to the venue for, the artistic swimming, I do agree when you go to some of these other centers, like say with wind sport, or I was watching the ring at the Western Championships. It was on Live Barn from Regina, and they have a rink there with 6 rinks in it, right? And it just makes it so much easier. So if there was a plug for, if they ever added that additional ice surface to the Collicut, I know with the Daw coming into play, we'll have to see what that looks like. But it would be really nice with some of those other facilities we've played at, like Terwilliger and Edmonton, where you can have a big tournament and everybody can watch, and you get a lot more exposure because there's just like they're not playing at multiple different rinks, right? Like that's what I found with Ringette. We get put at the Kinex. We don't get a lot of service ice, just which you can put a lot more people in to watch. But I know you guys don't have a lot of potential pull with the development maybe on that side, but that would be one thing, like to see those bigger places. Like I don't know if you've been to McDonald Island in Fort McMurray. We played ringette up there, and that's an amazing complex. They have, they have football, they have baseball, they have soccer, and 2 ice surfaces, a pool. Like it would have been lovely if we had something like that here as well, not just what they did with GW Harris or GH, whatever it's called, because there's still only 1 ice surface there. I was quite surprised that that's what they did with it. They could have been made a lot better to support the community. Yes, I get it. It's a college facility, but thinking bigger than just the college, they would have attracted a lot more stuff. So that's just my 2 cents on.
Yeah, no, great point. And Red Deer has some phenomenal facilities, but there's other parts of the province and the country that has some phenomenal facilities as well for hosting, big tournaments and events. And in some cases, although Red Deer has a fair number of ice surfaces in total, the structure and placing of them. But I think the thing I would like to build on your comment, Carolyn, is that, we as Central Sport need to hear these issues so that we can start to formulate long-term strategies with you, so that when it comes time to have the discussions about increased venue capacity or development, that it's thought through from all of these perspectives, not just from a city municipal government perspective necessarily, or perhaps in the case of the college, a college perspective. Of course, they have their needs, and that has to be considered, but it's the collab. If the user groups are going to be the community as a whole, then certainly they need to be aware of, the opportunities and issues and that kind of thing. So bringing them up now helps us to understand where we might need to go long-term, and position things a little bit, I'm going to say a little bit smarter with the long-term big picture in mind. And so it's good to raise them now for sure. Has anybody else got any other thoughts or comments on that? Our board can jump in too if you have any thoughts and your experiences. You don't need to sit on the sidelines here, except for Todd, because we can't hear him, but everybody else.
Yeah, it's Russ here, Carolyn. I just want to add, really, by advocating for a common voice in Central Alberta for sport, it will empower us to be more influential in these types of decisions in the future, with facilities and future events. So, trying to develop a long-term strategy and business plan that would look at, why some of these facilities aren't being developed or twinned. What is the return on our investment as a whole in the region, not even just in Red Deer, but in the region, and how can we better support and attract sport tourism to help sustain some of these facilities and the ongoing athletics and recognition and celebration that we want here in the community. So your comments and the other comments are so important, but we're here to act on those comments and start to generate some strategy behind this.
Yeah. Using the college facility as an example, there was lots of discussions about some of the other potential pieces that could have been a part of that facility. And, I think a combination of timing and a combination of, in some cases, political will and relationships probably got in the way of having a little bit more of a robust discussion around that facility development. And everybody needed a piece of it and everybody kind of got what they want. But collectively, you could argue that there could have been a bit of a bigger vision there in terms of the community side of it. Maybe it could have happened, maybe not. I don't know. Certainly, there was a lot of money invested in that facility, but I think the net result of that is that, ultimately, the more unified we are and the more we're working on sort of those issues long term, the more likely we are to influence decision makers when the time comes, because it's been part of a long-term advocacy process, not just sort of a reactive one when the situation arises. So I think it's a really good comment and a reflection that we need to consider in terms of the work that we need to do as Central Sport. So we've talked about major events and we've kind of talked around challenges, threats. Maybe I just want to go back around if anybody has any comments related to kind of our second question that's different. And really what we're looking for here, Christina likes to keep it positive by saying opportunities and strengths. I think at the end of the day, what we really do need to know is what are your challenges in terms of hosting events yourself. And I think we've heard a few of those. If there's any others that we haven't heard in terms of when you want to host an event as a sport in Red Deer, is there anything that you say, wow, there's some great opportunities that make it easy for us to do that, or there's some challenges, or there's some threats that say, it's too risky for us, or we're not sure we can do it, or, we don't have the right facilities. Maybe, looking other than facilities, is there anything that prevents you from wanting to host events in Red Deer? Anybody have any thoughts? Any things that run in the way? Carolyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just speak up because I have to say, like, Red Deer has actually been quite amazing. We host our annual Friends on Ice tournament at the beginning of January every year. And, the city goes definitely out of their way to really help us facilitate getting all the ice we can get and, making sure that we get what we need. And certainly even through this past January when we came back from COVID, like, the staff at the arenas were amazing. So, I mean, I don't really have any suggestions, but I do want to give them props because I don't think they often get that kind of feedback. We try to tell them whenever whenever I see them, specifically, the people that work in those facilities, we try to go out of our way. But I found the city very accommodating, and they usually really try to help us out. So, usually my comments is more back to, like I said, the facilities and just seeing, like some of the limitations, but I mean, you're trying to cram a lot of sports into a, I mean, it's a relatively big area, but we're not going to have everything like the major centers will, but I do think Red Deer City does a pretty good job for the most part.
Yeah. No, and we do. I think our city does, and I think it's good to recognize that. You can go to other places. Alberta, I would say, is pretty good. There's certainly other cities in the country, but there's many parts of this country that we've all been in that don't have anywhere near the facilities that we do here in Red Deer. And so we're very fortunate. And I think, it's always good to recognize and compliment the city. And you know what, that's part of our job too, as a sport group. When things are going really well, or they've, really been working hard with us, we need to recognize that. Or any of the other facility operators like the Westerner or the college or whatever. So I think that's really important. Any other thoughts on challenges you may face in hosting events? Do you host enough events for your sport? Do you have the opportunity to do so? What else can we share? Todd just shared a point here about, we have an amazing volunteer base. We know that, and that's awesome. And we want to make that even better as Central Sport, and we'll hear more about that later. Anybody else?
Scott, I'll just share further to Todd's comment. One of the common things we do here in the community, they have lots of opportunity to host events, but lots of times they don't have the volunteer base to support them. And so it's too much work, or they don't have the expertise to organize and put together. So they'd rather, let another city or community host event, and they'd be participants, spectators. So if we can help fill that void, that gap, and provide that expertise and those volunteers, hopefully we can attract a lot more of those, amateur provincial events and other opportunities that bring so much economic opportunity and tourism to Red Deer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, good comment.
I'm just curious, like of the sports on the call, because there's a good variety of like ringette and lacrosse and football. Are there sports where like actually just events other than maybe ones that you initiate yourself and run locally? Like, are there sports out there where there isn't the opportunity to host provincials or larger tournaments that would be bringing in out of town teams? Or does everybody have that opportunity? Oh, Christine has her hand up.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of your question. I think you were asking, are there events that we could host if the spot was available?
Or like, is that more like, is there a lack of like hosting opportunities where there isn't a lot of events out there that you could host, even if you wanted to, a potential kind of challenge for you is that they just don't exist?
With the artistic swimming, we do have 3 big competitions every season. So if we had a proper pool, we could definitely host probably one of those every other year because they tend to rotate. Calgary and Edmonton for sure get one every year, and the third rotates around the province.
Yeah, that's good. That's good
If
to know.
that helps.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
it's good just to know that there are tournament opportunities out there.
Yeah, there definitely would be.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts? Yep, go ahead. Elle McGowan, is that Lori or
Lori?
Okay. Hi,
With
Lori.
Red Deer Minor Football. I guess from the minor football side, we run Adam and Pee Wee age, and then our kids will flip up into the school programs for Bantam and high school age. So as far as like provincial stuff, our Adam teams really just we play weekly with our little guys. In the past few years, Greg's worked really hard with getting out of town teams, as far as Stettler, Rocky, Innisfail, Lacombe will come in and play at our field in Rosedale weekly with the little guys. Our Pee Wee age players travel. So weekly, we're either one of our teams is in town, one is out of town, as far as Strathmore, Drumheller, Stettler, Lacombe, those kinds of areas. So we do have kids at our field practicing 4 nights a week, and then Saturday game days at Rosedale. So our challenges are not more provincially. We did last year, one of our Pee Wee teams made it to our provincial finals. So that was pretty exciting for us when we actually hosted here down at Great Chief Park, which was great. Weather pending, of course. Some days that's nice and some that's not. This year was great, but our struggles are more weekly, I would guess, as far as, just facilities at our field for people that come in and see what we have. We've just about finished our building, or I guess we are finished, just some finishing touches in Rosedale right beside the skate shack. So we have a little bit of a facility, but when we have a couple hundred people there on Saturday mornings watching Adam football, our struggles would be more things like parking, bathroom facilities for 200 to 250 people. And those would be more of our challenges sort of on a weekly basis, as opposed to, we don't host anything big or tournaments or anything.
Right. Okay, good. Well, that's good. Good. Some good thoughts there too. That's valuable. Thank you. All right. Okay. Well, I think we're going to move on. Some good feedback, and it adds to other feedback that we've heard on several fronts to it. And I think this helps us to sort of formulate a couple of things, maybe some issues that are emerging that we may need to want to work on to try and alleviate some of the issues, and then also maybe some advocacy efforts and collective sort of strategy development going forward. So Okay, with that, we're going to move on to we're going to talk more about your sport organizations in general, not necessarily about events specifically. And I'm going to pass it over to Doug here to ask a couple questions and maybe get some feedback.
Sure. So I'm the chair of the Sport Development and Celebration Committee underneath our board structure. And as you can see on the screen there, we've got a couple of things that we're interested in just knowing more about and getting a better feel for what's going on in the community. And I guess we've talked about this at the board level quite a lot in terms of what is the role of Central Sport in assisting local sport organizations. So, and we sort of came up with the little sort of saying that if there are issues or pains that local sports have, then how can we become the people that can offer that some pain relief? So what are some of the biggest issues that there are for your sport within Red Deer or in Central Alberta? And again, not to feed you with answers or anything, but is there anything in terms of board structure, or is it volunteers, or is it could be anything? I want to leave it fairly wide open, so I'm not going to say any more on that, but just put it out to you folks to let us know what kind of things are issues with your groups in terms of running your sport here in Red Deer.
What's your biggest pain? Kimberly Smith. Go ahead, Kimberly.
I think for us, it's the turnover of coaches. So I'm not sure if that's something that happens in a lot of groups. I know for myself, I've got myself and my husband, and all 6 of our kids, all coaching lacrosse teams, trying to keep it all going and whatnot. But the sometimes lack of availability of coach clinics, or maybe the needs of these clinics for the cost of them and such. It can be daunting for organizations, minor sports especially, to keep coaches and to keep them engaged, and considering that we're kind of asking the moms and dads, and if they have other kids, it's hard to be committed to one specific team or anything like that. So I think for us, it's finding certified and trained coaches for our sports.
That is absolutely a great point. And I think, Al, you remember looking at one of the documents that I put together just today, where it talks about the most important sort of factor in youth being involved in sport is really having adults who are there, who are committed, and who are able to do all that groundwork that needs to be done to run the sport. So yeah, it certainly is an issue. I appreciate that comment.
Mike's got his hand up. Mike.
Yeah, I mean, coaches is definitely something that I know at a lot of different levels, football is struggling to keep that commitment. But also, I want to say referees. I don't know if there's not enough clinics going on or not enough attracting referees to the sport. But as football has grown in numbers, clubs getting, I know with the Lacombe Adam program, some years they can have 60 kids and you try and split that up, but you got 3 coaches. But when it comes to refs, we've got 9-man high school football, 12-man high school football. We now have midget football that takes place in the springtime. And so these programs have all grown, and I don't think we've gained any new refs in the past 5 years, 10 years. It's a very small number of certified officials out there to run these games for us. Yeah,
no, another good reflection for sure. we forget how important the officials are, for sure.
Kim,
Kimberly again.
Yeah, Kimberly.
I was just going to say, we are running several courses this weekend for lacrosse referees. If anybody's interested, just, let us know.
I know the pandemic seemed to have a big effect on officiating, at least in the sport of hockey, in terms of numbers, in terms of new ones coming. So I'm wondering, or coming back perhaps is another way. I don't know if that'll be the case next year when there's a full season on, but hopefully in all sports it's a bit of a blip. But certainly I imagine in a lot of sports there's pressures for sure.
Carolyn, go ahead.
Oops, sorry, still on mute. Yeah, I would agree with the comments, certainly about the refs. And yeah, for us, really, it was the pandemic as well that really kind of hindered us, like keeping them because they had to choose, some of them between playing and reffing. And so they went, chose to play. So we were really lacking refs, and that's throughout the whole province. And certainly coaches as well. We're begging people to coach, and then our parent group then complains that that's who they get, but nobody steps up to coach. And, I myself probably wear about a million hats within the organization itself, much it sounds like Kimberly with lacrosse. And we just don't even have enough volunteers. Like it's really hard to, make improvements that people keep suggesting when you don't have enough volunteers, never mind just even keeping it going, because at some point here, my daughter's in U16, like she's going to age out here. And as much as I love the sport, I can't see myself dedicating as much time as I do right now. So you definitely need some kind of support. And, we try to boost it with our own social media and try to think of ways to get other people to help volunteer. But if there was some way that we could tap into, like they did obviously for the Canada Winter Games, which is obviously on a lot grander scale, but we'd love to see some more support on the volunteer side for sure. And grants, we can always use money.
Carolyn, would you also say then, like, as you talked about kind of your experience and maybe, as your children become adults, so you might, become less involved. So would you say for Ringette, even just that, like the longevity of the system, if, if you're starting to step back, is there a concern that there's nobody to step up into those more executive roles as well?
Yeah, like myself, I'm the president of Red Deer Ringette, our technical director. I'm our league spokesperson. I was the apparel person till this year, basically, and, right? And so, I mean, I certainly would like to stay involved. I'd love to do like our U6 program when my daughter ages out and she can help me with it. I think it would be fun. I know a lot of the hockey dads have done that. They've kind of taken over that U5 program. There is nobody. Like I've been president. I kind of wanted to stick through the pandemic and then come out the other side and see if we could get back to some of the normalcy and implement some of the programs we had talked about. But we keep putting it out there. We're looking for an ISA allocator. We're looking for a sponsorship person. Yeah, we need people to take over as president coming up, and hopefully someone in the U10, so they can, come up with a totally fresh perspective, right? They've got different age group of kids, and that's the age we're trying to grow. It just, nobody seems to want to step up. And I know everybody's busy with their own lives. Like I have a full-time job and 2 kids, one playing high, Pee Wee AA hockey. So I didn't get to see him play much, which is sad. But, I just would love to see how we could utilize you guys to see if there's, even just people moving to the community looking to get involved in stuff. Like we did tap into some of that with some of our, our healthcare workers actually knew some people that had played Ringette. They had just moved here. So they actually came out and helped us, joined as an assistant coach with it, which I think is great. But if we could use your organization to put it out there more than just our own people, that we're looking for people who want to just get involved. Like when I first moved to Red Deer from Ontario, like that's what I did. I joined Ringette. Like I played with the ladies team and got involved and met a ton of new people. It's a good way just for people new to the community to get really into stuff, not just my sport, but any of the sports. Anything that they've done in the past would be great. So
good comments. Lori?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Carolyn. Exactly the same thing. We struggle with communications. We try and get our, our name and our brand out there and people involved in wanting to play so that we can get some more people involved. Because we struggle. I think Greg's been on running the board for 20-ish years. I think he's been here. He played and coached. My child aged out about 4 years ago, so I'm still here. Because there's just not enough people to take it over, and I think youth sport is the key to keeping kids out of trouble and giving them places to be and go and being great members of our society. So I think it's really important. Like I said, we struggle with communications and how to get out to the community. People don't seem to want to sort of let us put a poster in the window or send bulletins out through the schools. We're struggling with that and how to, and then somebody finds us, their kids first year Pee Wee, and they're like, we didn't even know you were here for the Atom age sports, so we could have had them for 5 years, but we get them for 2 sort of thing. And then, so that's a struggle, and always funding and grant applications, of course. We're going to lose our grant guy pretty soon. His kids have been out for about 4 years too. So same as Carolyn's struggles.
Yeah, it seems like there's always kind of there's sort of 3 different situations, it seems, with sporting groups. There's the groups that are struggling and barely getting by and working away at trying to make things better for their sport. There's groups that are successful, as I think Lori and Carolyn, you both represent groups that are successful groups, but they're kind of successful in spite of the fact that your volunteership is not strong and you don't have a lot of people, and the succession is not where you'd like it to be in terms of new people coming in and that sort of thing, but you're still successful. So how can we help with that? How can we get around some of those issues? And the third group then is, obviously the group who are successful and have lots of people involved and they're happily rolling along, and that's great. But I guess one of the questions we have to ask that top group is, how'd you get there? Yeah. I don't think anybody just starts out like that and rolls along with that really strong foundation right from the get-go. So, yeah, good points.
Unless you're hockey, and then every Canadian kid plays hockey, and all the dads. I mean, they're turning away volunteers, it seems. And maybe not at the board level, I'm being facetious, but certainly at the coaching level. Like, my son's team had 5 coaches. Sometimes it looked like there were more coaches than players. And COVID hit the team hard, so like,
I will say I also sit on the pond hockey board. We do not have that problem with too many coaches. We usually beg, steal, and borrow, both for referees and for coaches, and just plain general volunteer help. I think it was Carolyn that said this year, everybody seemed to struggle. It's like nobody wants to put their hand up to be the jersey mom or run a time clock for an hour, or run the sticks down the side of a football field. It's not complicated, but it's literally pulling teeth some days. And I don't know if that's a result of what's happened the last 2 years. I think we definitely noticed it in football more this fall than we really have in a long time. People will sit on their hands for hours before they, run a set of sticks or fill water bottles. And I'm not sure why that is, but yeah, those would be the same battles.
Okay. Kimberly has your hand up again. Kimberly, go ahead.
Well, no, I was gonna say, I was reading the comments here and I was reading what Todd had stated, that, yeah, it's really important that we bring in youth. And if we can make it easier for them to help coach. Our biggest issue that we find in lacrosse is that even though it's one of the oldest sports on earth, honestly, and has been Canada's national sport for well over 100 years, it's still very new, especially here in the West. Out East, it's considerably more popular, but here in the West, it's still fairly new. And part of our problem that we see is that we're about 2 to 3 generations behind BC and Ontario as far as players coming back or players having kids that they bring back. So we've often commented that, you know, if your mom and dad were curlers and that's what they did, well, then you as a kid probably curled. And if your mom and dad played hockey and that's what they did, then you probably played hockey. And the same goes for any of those other kind of things. So we don't have a lot of parents that played lacrosse. So one thing that we did implement through Central Alberta Lacrosse is we put in an application to the Alberta Lacrosse Association to develop a recreation format that required less certified coaches to be on board, and it's open to all ages. We do half an hour of skills and drills and half an hour of scrimmage using Masters rules, which is non-contact other than stick contact. And we're really hoping that especially after 2 years of pandemic lacrosse, which looked like total dog crap, that we can finally get that back and get these groups, these families participating in these sports. I agree with what you were saying, Carolyn, and again, and Linda as well, because we are having trouble finding parents who acknowledge that their kids are their responsibility both on and off the field. So we're trying to convince them that jumping in, even if you don't know anything, is better than saying nothing at all and not having your kids participate. So we're hopeful that way. I say it's in our own organization. I'm with Statler Minor Lacrosse. We started the organization here in 2010. I always say I have a very fine line between encouraging and bullying, and I'm fine with either. So sometimes we just have to put the sticks in their hands and say, "Hey, everybody, come on out. You're up next."
Great, good comments. Greg, your hands up raised.
One of the biggest things I think as an organization, and I don't know how many others kind of fall to that, but the one thing that I've noticed is year-round sport. So baseball's turned to year-round sport. Lacrosse, you got two different sections. Soccer, it's year-round. Hockey's almost year-round now, where we lose a ton of kids because they're focused on one sport, not multiple sport. And something that when I first started with the football organization is you used to get kids that played hockey, baseball, basketball, everything. And now, like, if you get a hockey kid, the first thing he does is like, "Oh, sorry, I'm going to hockey." And he messes up the football guy, right? So, and we get probably 20 to 25, maybe 30 hockey players that want to play football. But guess what? Once hockey starts, guess who's leaving the football program and leaves kind of teams high and dry a little bit, right? So that's one big, huge thing that I've noticed over the years of myself being around is there's a lot of year-round sport, not you play baseball at this time, you play football at this time, or you play hockey at this time. And everybody was sort of segregated and allowed kids to play a lot of sports. Now it seems that it's one, maybe two, and that's it. So that's kind of my comments on just kind of that pain issue with local sport from around.
Yeah, no, that's a good comment. Okay. Doug, any final comments there?
Well, I mean, we've never fails when you get into a discussion like this. You kind of cover both questions at the same time. In a lot of instances, I think there's been lots of good comments, and I think so much of it, in answer to the second question from our perspective, just again goes right back to where we started with the presentation tonight in terms of we're going to be working hard at collaboration. And so, as I was mentioning earlier, if we can find out from the most successful organizations, how did you do it? What did it take? What kind of things can be provided to help other groups to get to that point? Then that's kind of what we're all about, and what we'll enjoy doing on behalf of the groups here in Red Deer is to push for more and more involvement and connecting with various groups and see if we can work together to solve a lot of these problems.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Well, and on the topic of communications and marketing, we're going to hand it over to Christina, who's going to talk a little bit about how we're working to make Central Sport, in a sense, a portal and a hub for you to really communicate what you need to and market your sport and communicate and connect with other sports. So I'm going to hand it over to Christina now to talk about that.
Great. So in November of 2021, we launched the Central Sport logo, and we launched centralsport.ca and then our Facebook and Twitter social media channels. So these were really in line with the vision of Central Sport, that through excellence and regional collaboration will be Central Alberta will be known as a leader provincially, nationally, and internationally. And then further to that, it's the website and just this idea of Central Sport as a hub is really in support of the pillar of Central Sport to sport advocacy and development. In November 2021, as I mentioned. And at that time, we'd gone out to local sport organizations and they submit their information, and so they came featured on our site. So that those first few months was just getting our website bug-free. We didn't run into any issues and just starting to build a presence. And then since then, we've worked on our site further, and we've added a facility directory. And then we've also turned the keys of the sport directory, like your profiles, over to those organizations who have their sport listed on our website. We further enhanced the sport facility directory by adding in categories. So you're able to not only just sort by sport, which has been available since day one, but you can sort by the kind of type of sport organization, because, you know, in Red Deer, we have Red Deer minor soccer, but we also have the Royal soccer camp. So they are both soccer in terms of a sport category, but the Royals camp is a camp and training type, and the Red Deer minor soccer is more of the club and league. We've also added in a functionality for age brackets. Because as a newish mom, I have an almost 2-year-old and I have another one on the way. I'm like, what can I put my kid in at this stage? And the answer is not much, but just future-proofing this maybe for myself, that we now have age brackets. So you can put in, if you're looking for sports that are for infant, toddler, preschooler, child, youth, teen, and adult. And then we've also added in community tags so that sport organizations can identify if they're like what Central Alberta community that they're located in. So we have over like 30 local sport organizations, clubs, leagues, camps, events on our site so far in terms of the sport directory. And then last month we launched our facility page. So we're working with the city to get some of their facilities on there, because we only at this point in time have 3 facilities currently listed, but it's just an opportunity for the public or to go on the site to see what sport facilities are available to book, what kind of amenities does Red Deer have. So that's a bit of a work in progress for us, but also is for facilities or sports that may also have their own facility. I don't believe that anybody, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure, Lori, you talked about the having the Rosedale fields. I'm not sure if that's something that you guys also rent out, or if it's something that you rent from the city and then kind
of
yeah.
So it's and Greg could correct me if I'm wrong, but that the upper field, which would be on the south side closer to the skate shack, and then the bottom field, there's 2 are our fields, I guess you would call them. They're dedicated to minor football, but we do pay fees to use those every year. Yep.
Yeah, because if you would consider yourself like a facility owner, then you could also utilize the facility directory function on our website. where you could list that if it is something available and you want to encourage others to rent it from you if that's a possibility. I'm just going to go. Greg has his hand up.
Yeah, the deal that we kind of got with the city is we got an exclusive use. So we get it from basically May till November, and it's ours. So nobody else can use that field unless they kind of request it from us. So we try to be accommodating. I know lacrosse was over there last year, and then they've had some ultimate disc frisbee, and then the men's flag football also uses it kind of when we're not. And then they actually had a Quidditch tournament as well at one point there as well. So we don't use it all the time, but it's just kind of the agreement that I've got with the city, just because I do have a 40 by 40 foot facility kind of spot there that's ours, and we kind of get first right of refusal on it. So
Great. So if you want, I'll put the link in the chat in a minute, and you can also add yourselves as a facility member on the site. Then also on our website, we have an event calendar. So as if you're listed on the sport directory, it's really easy for you to use your profile and go in and add an event. But also just anyone from the public is able to go in, submit an event for consideration, and then we'll review and approve it. We do request that the events are obviously like sport and recreation in nature, but they could be a marathon, it could be a hockey tournament, as long as it's open to kind of spectators and participants. That basically meets our criteria in terms of if we'll share it or not. We do a monthly newsletter, so we've been doing that since November, and we issue that mid-month, and we reach out to all of our sport directory and facility directory members and offer them the opportunity to share any articles they may have or information they want to share. So if you are doing registration for the upcoming summer season, or you're looking for volunteers, or you're looking for coaches, whatever, if you're running a 50-50 and you want to get some word out about that, please send it to us. We can include it in our newsletter. We'll also likely include it on Facebook and our Twitter page, and potentially also include it just on our general blog post function on the website, because we really want this site to be, and the channels like the social media, the newsletter, any of our communication channels, we want them to be just a hub of information about sport in and around Red Deer. So if there are any initiatives, just send them our way. Like if you have a regular media list that you contact, add info@centralsport.ca on there. Like add us to your current mailing lists, add us to your media outreach efforts. Just keep us in mind. I mean, the worst that we can say is no, or sorry, we missed the deadline. Can we put you in next month? So there's always opportunity there for us to help amplify any of your messages and help address any of those kind of communication pain points that you feel you may have. And then, if you do have any questions, concerns, ideas, just send us an email at info@centralsport.ca, and we're happy to kind of troubleshoot with you or share information with you. And we just because we just launched in November too, we're also building our audience. So the more content we can get from local sport organizations, the more we're sharing, the more we're viewed as a resource and that hub. And it's just to that overall betterment of sport in and around Central Alberta. So I just posted in the chat how to sign up. Most of you are members of the sport directory, but if you wanted to add, if you want to add a facility or you want to join, I've just pasted that there in the chat for you.
Great. Any questions for Christina right now in terms of sort of our communications and support? And we certainly are open to any thoughts on it. I think it's an evolving piece. We really, as Christina said, our goal is to make this the site that people go to initially when they're looking for something on sport, and if it's about Ringette, they may go directly there, but if they're not sure, they go to this site and then they see information on Ringette or another sport and go, oh, that's interesting, I'm going to click on that. So it becomes that central entry point. And of course, your information is on there, and it takes you to your Facebook page or your website or your email or phone number or contact information. And that is, we're always willing to help you with that if you have any issues on adding information or whatever. But for the most part, it becomes something that you can update as you go along, as people change in your organization or you have new initiatives or whatever. So some groups are starting to take advantage of it, and we're starting to see some benefits. But
yeah, shout out to Christine with the Red Deer Silhouettes, who's like utilized. There's a photo album function on the directory. So we really view it as, I've used this word a number of times already too, is to amplify. So it's not to replace your website or your social media channels. It's just to supplement it, to provide that centralized location online where Central Albertans can get a quick snapshot of like what are the sport and recreation opportunities in and around Red Deer. And we've designed the site so that it's easy for the LSOs to go in and update, and then doesn't require a lot of updates because it's really just directing people back to your site and your official channels.
yeah, and I think the other thing I would add is on the event calendar side of it, it's an event calendar focused on sport and activity events. It's not focused on anything else. And so although there's a few other calendars in the city that are adding events, and that some of them are very busy and very crowded, and there might be 15 events on one weekend and you wouldn't even see your minor football, tournament that you're having or whatever. But in the case of the Central Sport Calendar, it's going to be focused on, what's current in sport and what's happening. And we're adding stuff as well as we learn about it and find out about it. We add information ourselves. So, okay, we're going to, that's great. Thanks, Christina. Okay, we're just going to move on to our last little piece here tonight to talk about. Now, as I mentioned at the top, one of our board of directors is Laura Naldred, who is heading up our volunteer committee and support services program. For those of you who don't know Laura was the manager of workforce and volunteer services for the 2019 Canada Winter Games, an unbelievable, huge function in the games that has the complexity and the depth of it was something I've never seen. And Laura, by her background, is an HR professional and just did a phenomenal job in building and building the program with the team. And we learned a ton out of that. And she learned a ton out of it, and she's very passionate about it. So if she was here, she would be probably a little better at this than myself. But I will share with you a few of the slides that she put together and talk a little bit about where we're going with regards to volunteer support, because we heard some of that tonight. And I think, we are positioning ourselves to really help you as sport organizations on the volunteer side. So right off the start, one of the things I want to share is we've heard lots of feedback on volunteers in the workshops that we've done, and we've heard some more about it tonight. And I think there might even be a new one we heard tonight that's really important. But some of the things that we've heard from the sport community already is that, there's not enough volunteers to do the work, or volunteers that do not carry through on their commitments. This is something that we've heard, promoting community awareness of volunteering, getting enough volunteers for the club to grow. We heard that tonight very clearly as a challenge. Getting qualified and quality volunteers, of course, is something we all want. Success in recruiting younger volunteers as a challenge. Guidelines and tips and best practices on volunteer recruitment, retention, selection, training, or recognition. Samples or templates and organizational documents that can help us with our volunteer program. And information from which a sport organization could pick and choose, and what is needed. So from this kind of feedback we've been hearing, we are building a program to support the sport community with these challenges and help you with them. And one of the ways, that we are going to do that is, and using, we're fortunate to be able to have taken all of the tools and templates and strategies and documents that we used in the Canada Games. We are able to use those. They're going to be repurposed and refocused, but we have the ability to have those tools available to you. And so kind of looking at volunteerism from a full cycle of management templates, tools, and project plans is what we're putting together. Everything from what do you, when you're hosting an event, what do you actually need from a volunteer point of view in your event? I know sometimes, we work so often that we end up having enough volunteers. In some cases, we have too many that don't have jobs, or they don't end up doing very many things. So part of the tools that we have is to help you understand what you might need there. The recruitment and selection and assignment of those volunteers, once you know what you want, the orientation and training and the scheduling and recognition and event support that you might need, and then communication best practices, some of the things that we learned, through the games. We had over 4,600 volunteers for the games from age 16 to probably 85, and they all had roles and responsibilities and training and support and some of those things. And a lot of that work was done by volunteers and supporting that volunteer program. But the idea is that we want to build this so that it's a program that can support any event, and any need that you may have as a sport organization. We intend to have some trained people that can come to your sport, identify what your needs are, sit down with you, take a look at what your challenges are, and determine a path or a strategy or a work plan going forward with you using some of these tools, and support you through that. And that is, really a big part of what we want to do. So it's going to be very hands-on. It's not just going to be a bunch of links on a website. We're actively going to be leading this with people that can help you. A second part to the program that we're really excited about is actually creating a volunteer pool. Laura likes to use the term ninja, a group of ninja volunteers, a pool of volunteers that can be called upon in with certain skill sets to help you either with your event or in some cases with your organization as you need them. And she uses an example of event photographers. We worry, obviously the most important things when we're hosting events are to schedule and to organize and get the minor officials and the athletes on the field and going through things. But sometimes it'd be great if we had somebody who's dedicated to taking great photos of our events so we can capture that. Well, we're going to have a group of volunteer photographers that are ready to be called on by your event. We're going to have volunteers that can do the STEAM Pro economic impact assessment, let's say for bigger events, events that can help you with volunteer coordination in general, or a venue manager or communication and social media coordinator for your organization. So the idea is we're going to build a pool of volunteers. It's going to be a club, and people are going to want to be a part of it. And they're going to be very interested in volunteering for other sporting events. One of the things that we found out, through the games, there was so many volunteers that were excited about their experience, that wanted to come back and do more, but they have no idea how to do that. Perhaps they're retired, or perhaps they're, they have some time now. Their kids are older and they really enjoyed their volunteer experience with the games, and they're just waiting to be involved in something else. And so we're going to tap into that energy and whatever, and build a pool of volunteers that can actually help you, maybe with short-term needs or event needs, or help move you towards the next level with your volunteer program. We are going to, have a volunteer network database that we're going to work on eventually, where we can, for major events that come to town, maybe they need 40 volunteers. A good example was the CFR. At one point were short volunteers they needed, and we're going to be there to support events like that with being able to call on people who have already put their hand up, have had some level of training, and can help those events when needed. So this is a really important service that we are looking at building for the Central Alberta sport community. And Laura has gotten started with her team trying to scope some of these things out. We certainly are interested in hearing from you if you have any needs that you foresee coming in the summer, the spring summer. It will try to help there, and going forward, become more and more capacity will get built to support your event or your needs as an organization or club. So that's kind of where we're headed with our volunteer program. We got a great, a small committee that's forming, but we're going to be adding some more people to that. And the one thing I can say with clarity is that Laura has a great vision for this. She is absolutely one of the best, probably in the country, at understanding what it is we need to do here. And we're so grateful to have someone from her perspective and her leadership in Red Deer, and it's going to make Red Deer just a fantastic place to have sport events, but also supporting our sport clubs going forward. So a bit of a sales pitch, but I'm pretty excited about where this is headed and how it can help you as a sport. Is there any questions on that in terms of information? It kind of rambled quickly. If there's any questions, we'll certainly pass them on to Laura. If things, we've identified some volunteer needs already, of course, but is there any comments on it? How does that sound as a support service to you as a sport? Anybody want to chime in on that? Is there anything we're missing?
Sounds really good to me, Carolyn again. And that's funny, I didn't know that that's what Laura did. She actually, her daughter Julia plays ringette. So I'll have to bug her through the ringette channels too to get us more exposure through this. But yeah, I didn't realize, like, yeah, if we can put our links and, you know, put events, obviously get vetted and everything, because we just had a come try it event that we, you know, we tried to promote through our own channels, but only had 4 people show up. Maybe we get a lot more exposure through this. So I'm pretty
Right.
excited to get a lot more exposure through working with you guys on a lot of this stuff. So it all sounds really good.
Yeah, and you know what, Karen, I can honestly say that when you're right. Laura had her daughter Julia in ringette, and you know, she's a young parent, of course, or with kids in the sport, but she you make sure you have an hour or two, because she'll have lots to say. She's pretty passionate about it. So
for sure, because I mean, we've got to see what else she thinks of how we can try and get more people to help volunteering. Because back to, I think it was what, you know, Kimberly was saying about almost a bit of bullying. We're gonna have to threaten these people to volunteer that, you know, that they owe us so many hours. But I don't really like getting that way. We've never been that type of organization. But
right,
you know, we'll see what I'll definitely pick Laura's brain. That's for sure.
Sure. Mike, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, the Buccaneers, we love to volunteer and work in community groups, and we do a lot of legwork for fundraising and stuff like that so we can be operational. But then game day comes around and we all want to play football. And then we dig and call up favors, and we call upon alumni and anybody we can to help work a beer garden or the front gate or 50-50, stuff like that. So we're running around in circles on game day or leading up to try and make sure that we can have that program, because it's a crucial form of our revenue. So yeah, you know,
absolutely,
we'll help scratch your back if you want to come out of the game.
You know, the other example is during the games, we had many companies come to us and say, one of the things we want to do is we want to volunteer as a group of 12 or a group of 25 or whatever it is as a company. And so obviously it's not for everything, but in terms of events, especially, there are some examples of that, you know, again, we hope to cultivate through our connections and stuff and create a program where, you know, we need 12 people to come and, you know, run concessions and do this at an event, but the company's really interested in having their team do that as long as they can do it as a group. And so that's another example of where we can provide some, you know, support and resources as we build those networks going forward. But, you know, in a sense, you know, the Buccaneers are a group like that already, doing that with other events in the community. So that's pretty cool. Awesome. Okay. So that's kind of what we wanted to share tonight. Before we close, maybe I'll just pass it back to Al if you want to have any closing comments, Al, and we'll close it up.
Well, thank you, Scott, for hosting, and I really appreciate the input from the groups. And I could see some of the board members. I could see the facial recognition just reaffirming, and also some really good new points of view. What I would ask is the groups that participated today, if you learned a few new things or new perspectives, for example, Christina, your comments on, you know, using the website, I'd encourage us all to share with other sports as well. Because over and over here, we talked about the collaboration and the strength in groups. And one other theme that came through and to our board, we can see where I think we really do need that one voice talking to decision makers in our community about some of the, I guess, the pains we heard tonight. And I promise you that we will advocate for all sports in our city and in our region. Christine, your energy was palpable through my laptop. So thank you for, you're doing really good for ladies getting close to the end of the journey. Well done, Christina. Okay, so then in closing, thank you for your time, folks, and I encourage you to reach out to us. No ask is unreasonable, and it'll help us grow as an organization if you challenge us. Okay,
Absolutely.
good. Thank
So
you
with
again.
With that, thank you everybody and for your time, and we'll be connecting with you again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, folks. And Christina and Doug, you two are going to chat a bit.
Yep.
Okay, good.